Good evening. My report is all about the major agrarian farms in Haiti. As you can see, we have the map of Haiti, and now let us discuss their land tenures. Land use. Haiti's total land area is 27,600 square kilometers. 58% of land is agricultural. 40% of total land area is arable and permanent cropland, of which 8.5% is irrigated. Forest land constitutes 2% of the total land area in Haiti, reduced from 80% at the beginning of the 20th century. Approximately 81% of Haitian forest land is natural forest area, while 24% is plantation forest area. Nationally protected areas constitute 0.3% of total land. So we have our graph here. It summarizes the land use in Haiti. Land distribution. 80% of rural households have access to land, often a simultaneous and dynamic mix of owned land, leased land, and land sharecropped or worked as wage labor. Land holdings average 1.8 hectares per household, usually divided among several plots. And these are how plots are divided in Haiti. So the poorest farmers cultivate 0.54 hectares, while the wealthiest farmers cultivate 2.51 hectares per household. So the poor tend to farm plots that are nearly twice as far away from their homestead as those of the wealthier families. And the female-headed households tend to have fewer and smaller land plots than male-headed households. We don't know the reason, but of course, gender at Haiti matters when it comes to land distribution. Legal framework. Article 36 of Haiti's constitution recognizes and guarantees the right to private property. The constitution expressly requires agricultural landowners to cultivate their land and protect it against erosion. So, if the people in Haiti would like to settle their land, they will refer to the Rural Code, Law of 24 May 1962, amended on 1986. So, this is where the primary existing legislation that is related to rural land with the help of 19 separate laws. Let us proceed with the tenure types. Rural land ownership is generally governed by customary law and traditional practice as opposed to formal law. Land is largely individualized. Rural communities in Haiti do not have a tradition of communal land management, although land held by families may remain undivided. So land rights in urban areas may be controlled by the central government. Municipal governments are private individuals and entities. Most residential land rights in urban areas are formally held due in part to the lengthy and costly registration system. So under the customary system, rural land is acquired through purchase of 37%, divided inheritance 23%, undivided inheritance 15%, and other means. About 10% of Haiti's agricultural land is possessed by leaseholders and by squatters on state land, which is 5% of rural households. Now let's discuss the land rights in Haiti. 38% of rural land was obtained by inheritance, an almost identical percentage of 37% by purchase. Under customary law, kinship groups have an obligation to make land available to all members of the group. Land is also accessed through other social relationships such as patron, client, and fictional kinship alliances. These relationships provide for security of access. So formal registration of rural land is rare. Farmers avoid obtaining formal title due to the high costs associated with registering land. So, usahay ra or panalag sara ang magpa-register sa ilang land because of its high price. Distrust of government officials is common. Fees and taxes for registered land are high, and registration creates a risk of diminishment of land area. That is why it is very seldom for people who owns land at Haiti to register their land because of the risk of diminishment. Foreigners can own 1.29 hectares in urban areas and 6.45 hectares in rural areas. Foreigners cannot own more than one residence in the same district or own property or buildings near the border with the Dominican Republic. To own real estate, foreigners must obtain authorization from the Ministry of Justice. So Haiti has no systematic national cadastre or registration system. Although the Direction General de Impôts is the central institution responsible for maintaining and updating registration records that do exist, some local areas, such as Port-au-Prince, have their own land registration system. And Port-au-Prince is the capital of Haiti. So their living is advanced compared to the other parts of Haiti. Land administration and institutions. The Ministry of Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Rural Development is responsible for the promotion of agriculture, rural development, and the protection of natural resources. Land administration is governed by formal and customary systems. Formal transactions require documents prepared by notaries and updated surveys. Haiti does not have a national cadastre and lacks a comprehensive, functional system for recording land ownership. Some areas of highly productive land, such as the irrigated zones of the Artibonite Valley and Gonavs Plains, created local cadastres, but they not have been maintained and the records are not current. So under the Constitution, property can only be taken for a public purpose and with fair compensation paid. Land reform is considered to be a public purpose. So, under na siya sa ilahang balaod. The Constitution prohibits confiscation of land for political purposes. An expert must determine the value of the land, and the government must compensate the landowner based on that valuation. In 2007, the government of Haiti released a national strategy paper for growth and poverty reduction that is made up of 3 pillars, one of which includes promoting agriculture and rural development. So from 1991 to 1996, the National Institute of Agrarian Reform implemented a land reform program in the Tribunite Valley, the primary rice-growing region in Haiti. The program was designed to redistribute disputed land to landless families. And that's it for my report. Thank you for listening. God bless.